Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks. I can see Anya in the audience, who is a fellow designer. So thanks for coming along, Anya, and good to meet you all. What I'm going to do first is share my screen, but straight off the bat, I'd love to just hear from you in the chat box and let me know if you are a company or an individual or a personal brand. I'd like to know kind of where you're at in business and what you're doing, so do let me know there. This presentation I've named just 5 ways for leaders, employees and clients to build brand confidence. And brand confidence was something that I trademarked last year because through my work over the last few years, I've realized that everything that we do, say, show, put out there into the world has a set amount of confidence attached to it, whether it's for yourself or for customers or maybe for colleagues or team members. So I started to gear everything towards building confidence in people and teams and leaders, and also for customers as well. And I want to show you the ways through branding that you can do that. And there'll be, this is some of it you would have heard of before. So things like values and your mission and vision and those kinds of things. But I actually want to give you the practical things that you can do to go and dig a little bit deeper and discover those for yourself as well. So hopefully a little bit of practical stuff in there that you can take away. So let's get into this. What is brand confidence? If you imagine your everything you do, whether it's creating content online, whether it's calling a customer to see how an order went or how a service ran to get some feedback or a testimonial, or anything else. All of this we can use to build our confidence in business, whether you personally or whether in a company. So brand confidence is the thing where if leaders have it, then they can move their employees to do certain things and have certain beliefs. If employees have it, they pass it on to consumers. And when the consumers have it and the employees have it and the leaders have it, organizations really thrive because everyone's confident in the message, the direction they're going in, and the ultimate vision that the company will go in. So it helps to bring all of that into alignment. Before we go into kind of brand confidence and all these things, we probably need to know a little bit about what a brand is. And I know this is a humongous and broad subject. You know, there's hundreds of different facets within brand, but I want to keep it really simple. So the easiest way that I think we can do that is by looking at what isn't a brand. And when we're talking about branding or your brand, we're not talking about the logo you use, the text you use, the colors that you have as part of your brand. What we're really talking about is how the outside world and your consumers or the customers or clients you have perceive you as a person or company, and whether you live up to the promise that you give through your messaging and through how you communicate with them. So that's a little bit of a sideline on brands there. Really what brand is strategy, it's messaging, it's behavior, so the things that you do. So the strategy is kind of the vision and the long-term thing. Messaging is how you communicate. The behavior is what you do and how you show, how you perform or react in day-to-day life. And then there's your visual identity, which is the final thing, which is what is involved in your logo, your colors, your text, and all the rest of it, the thing that makes up your visual identity in your brand. And brand confidence is these things, and all of these things are then taken on board by leaders, by employees, and then by the clients. So this is kind of how it all revolves into one. And when they do happen, all of them, businesses really thrive. So I want to give you a bit of an insight into how to get started with those, and hopefully that will help you in finding your own vision and values. So strategy first. It's always first. If we don't know where we're going, if we don't know the goals that we're setting, then we don't know how we're going to get there. So it becomes really difficult. So strategy first as a mindset is how I roll here. These 5 things are the bare minimum. They're by far and wide not what your full brand should entail, but these things are like the bare minimums that would really help you to build confidence when you're communicating with people, when you're coming up with ideas for new products, when you're communicating to your team, and those kinds of things. These are the bare minimum, and the things you start with, really. So, first things first, what is your purpose? And even now, even though I've done this for a while, even when I ask that question, it feels a little bit overwhelming. Like I've got to like decide on what I'm going to do for the rest of my life and how I'm going to impact this earth that we live on. But really, your purpose, if you're a business, can just be a problem you're solving. It doesn't have to be this kind of all-encompassing magical thing that happens when we find alignment in ourselves. So if you're a personal brand or a company brand, and I'll have a look at those in just a minute, finding your purpose can actually be as simple as just solving the problem and doing it very well. So let me have a look very quickly at the chat. I'm just going to jump into the chat browser, see what's been happening there in terms of like the
yeah, so we've got a few people in the chat saying that they are from a company and themselves. So when you asked that question early on, are they from a company or are they from a personal? We've got both there. We've got somebody who recently branded their own company during lockdown, and somebody who started a new business a month before lockdown, and then somebody who's an employee for a small business. So we've got a range of people who are on the attending this event today. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So for the people that are employees of companies, it would be really interesting to know, and just stick it in the chat box. Do you know your company's purpose? Do you know that kind of goal that they're trying to reach, or the thing that they're really trying to do to change something in the world? Do you have that? Is there something set there? Or is it just an unknown? Do you not know? Because I've seen both sides. I've seen companies that really care about what their purpose is, and that's the thing that drives them to kind of get out of bed every morning. And other people that, the owner of the company, where it might be a small business, they have no idea. It's that there is no very particular set purpose, and it's not that they don't have one; they just haven't discovered it. So I find that really interesting. So for What's Company recently rebranded, there's been a big focus on purpose. Yeah, great. That's really good to hear. Goal and vision is quite clear. We discuss it often as a team. That's an amazing thing to do. If you're reinforcing that purpose and what you do. That's great. So let me jump back into this. Cool. When you're looking for your purpose, what I like to do is treat it as a bit of a, there's a few exercises that I run through with clients, but very often it's just, it's something you can do yourself. And at the end of this, I'll give you a few things that you can do that with. And purposes for me is about the battle of good and evil. So if you're really trying to discover this, try and think of the company or yourself, if you're a personal brand, as like a superhero. Every superhero has this, even though they have powers or things that they do, there isn't evil that they're trying to stop in the world. And thinking of it in this good and evil way can sometimes be a really simple way of trying to discover the problem you're trying to solve, or the bigger cause that you're working for. So just having a list of the good that you want to do in the world and the bad that you want to rid of in the world is usually a really good way of doing this. And it's a little bit like at the start when I said, to understand what branding is, you kind of have to understand what it's not. So that's a good way to weigh up those. So that's an exercise that everyone can do. Let me just shift this a minute, because I've got this chat box here. Okay, so what is your vision? Now, so if we've talked about the purpose of the company, how is the vision different? So if you've got a purpose and something you're trying to rid of in the world, what is the vision, and how is that different? And the vision for me is the big change you want to see in the world. So whereas the purpose is kind of, it's the audacious thing, the vision is kind of where you want to be further down the line. And a really good way that I've thought about doing this with clients is think about it in terms of headlines. So if you think further down the line, you're walking down the street, probably on your own or at least 2 meters away from people, and you pick up a paper that hopefully no one's touched just in case. And it's got a headline on it about you or your company. What do you want that to say? Have you rid the world of a virus? I didn't mean to go there. But have you maybe done something that's incredible in the world and you want to shout about it, whether that's to, and that can be as simple as growing the company to a certain amount or reaching a particular goal. It can be financial, it can be team related, it can be values related. So if you want to be the company that hits 100 million with the least amount of employees, you know, because you know then that you are productive or efficient or whatever that may be, and you want to show people that's your thing and that's what you want to shout about, then that's what it should be. So try and think about 10 years down the line what you would want a headline about you or your company to look like and what that says, because it will really help you find the thing that you're really working towards for that long-term goal. While I'm going through this, I'm about to get onto the third one, which is, sorry, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'd love to hear if anyone's actually worked this out and their kind of vision or what they want to achieve further down the line. I'd love to hear those. If you want to type them in the box, that'd be great, and I'll review them towards the end. Visions for companies can differ massively, and here's a few examples. So Alzheimer's Association, for example, their vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease. Very, very simple. They want to cure Alzheimer's disease and they want to get rid of it for good. So a very, very simple vision for those. But for others, completely different. Amazon, as we all know, I think we're using those a lot more now, their vision is to be the Earth's most consumer or customer-centric company and to build a place where you could pretty much buy anything you want online. So they consistently go out and buy other companies, smaller companies that do what is in their vision, whether it's groceries, whether it's electricals, whether it's books, whether it's pets, whatever that may be. They actively look to buy companies or start brands in those particular sectors to slowly become the number one way where we shop online, and they continue to do that. Another one is Google. Really simple, just to organize the world's information and make it accessible to everyone. Really, really simple. And I think nowadays we think of Google as this massive, huge conglomerate that has all different things going on, and they have, but their vision is still very simple. They just want to make information accessible to everyone. And then we've got Instagram, which is just to share moments. So it's always been a visual platform, it still is, and their vision is just to capture and share the world's moments. It's something that they do as a platform and something that they promote, and also lets other people do that as well. So it's an all-encompassing thing. It's not just kind of about them, it's about everyone included and involved. So your mission. Now, I want to discuss what the differences are, because sometimes they're unclear. So the vision is the long-term goal. It's the thing you're working towards. And your mission should be how you're going to get there, the thing that you wake up every day to do. And finding your mission is it can be simple or hard, and hopefully this will kind of help you get to that stage. So I think about the mission as the stepping stones to the vision. So it's that every day you wake up and you're going to do these things, and that's going to get you to the longer goal. There's some examples of this, but very, very simply, you can just write down the answers to what do we do, and don't overthink it. Just very simply, what do we do? How do we do it? Who do we do it for? And how does it help them? And then one thing that I've always been a real believer of is challenging whatever your thoughts are. So a really good way to do this, usually when I do this workshop with clients, and it's not lockdown, we would actually take them out of the workplace so it doesn't feel like work, and we'd move them to a different area, and we would talk like friends to really get to really break the pattern of their working. to try and get these answers and really challenge what they originally thought the answers to these were. So what I'd encourage you to do is to maybe bounce them off some colleagues or peers or friends or people that think they understand what you do, but could do with a little bit more explaining or a little bit more in-depth explanation. And then ask the questions again, but in a slightly different way. And this just helps to challenge your answers. What do we need to do? And how do we need to do it? And who do we need to do it for? And how does it need to help them? And it gives us a different perspective on what you're currently doing and how you can innovate into the future and how you can change things or adapt your messaging. And it can be as simple as changing your tagline to match more about what you do for a customer or for a client. Or it can be something a little bit more in depth. But that I found is a really simple way to do that. So here's a few examples. This is how eBay are going to achieve their vision. They'll provide a global trading platform where practically anyone can practically trade anything. And it's kind of been like that for a while. I remember years ago, someone said you could buy I think it was something to do with animals. They used to jar something to do with animals. It's crazy. I think it was hair or something. And you could buy these really weird and wonderful things. I never really understood it, but you could literally search eBay for anything and probably find it. Toyota have got quite an interesting mission by leading the way to the future of mobility, enriching lives around the world with the safest and most responsible ways of moving people. So they're actually not about speed and looks or anything like that. They just want to kind of move the needle a little bit on transport and doing that responsibly and safely. So a lot of what they do behind the scenes is safety. I know all car makers do that, but Toyota particularly put a really high emphasis on the safety of the vehicles that they put out there. So I guess one of the final parts there, just before the last one, is values. And I'll shoot through this quickly because I think we all get a general idea of what our values are. And this is just a way for you to start to challenge those, I guess, and start to expand on those. So your values are simply, what are you good for? And you're absolutely nothing without them, because the values are the things that you hold inside you. And I guess one of the things that I try and decipher a little bit is the difference between the values that you have and then the values that the company has. And they shouldn't be different, really. That if it's your company and you're running it, then that is where you should start. You should start with you and what your values are. And then maybe if the company gets bigger, it starts to become more about the people than you, in which then they adapt. So one of the things to bear in mind is that brands are fluid. They don't, they're not created and then they stick where they are. They are fluid and they change. So I think a lot of people get a little bit overwhelmed with doing these kind of exercises. And I would always say to you, they're for now, not forever. And don't let it hold you back from really finding your message and what you want to do in the world, because sometimes it holds people back longer than it needs to, and they never do anything. So remember that these can change, and there's nothing wrong in that. So these are some IKEA's example of what their values are, and you'll notice that these aren't words. So a really good way, and you might have done this before, where you list what you think your values are or what your values are, and then you can choose a few of them. But what IKEA do, and what I encourage other people to do, is to find phrases or statements that describe the value. So rather than it being, so in this example, rather than it being like leadership, or one of your values is trust, or people, and caring for the people. Instead, they've gone for leadership by example, because then it holds a little bit more weight, because it goes from, I think leadership's important, to leading by example is going to do better for our people. So we're actually doing the thing, not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk kind of thing. So it has a little bit more weight behind it, as well as things like cost consciousness. they realize that they want to create a quality product, but it doesn't have to cost the earth, and it needs to be simple. So IKEA have come up with these statements. So rather than just having a list of values, try and find a statement that really explains the weight behind what your value is. And the final bit is personality. And this is probably the most fun part of branding, especially for me anyway, because this is the part that gives me a real insight into what people actually want visually from their brand, because you can put personality behind the visual, and you can almost compare it with things you've already seen. So what I like about this is that you start to discover what is different about you. One thing that it really gets me when people say the difference about my business is me, because it's only half true. It's not just about you. There's something inside of you that's really valuable. So just to say it's me is almost like dumbing it down. Like there's something really amazing about you, but you need to communicate that to your customers and your audience, as it's just a thing you have, like you hold. It's not being put out there into the world. So try and think about, even though you are the difference in your business, what about you is different? So think about what other brands are like you, so other companies that are maybe competitors or other people you work with, even suppliers, and start to ask questions like, what about them are we like, and what about them don't we like, and that we don't want to be like. And a little bit like the other exercises, by looking at almost the negatives, the things that you don't want to be like, you start to figure out who you are and what about you is special to put out there in the world. And this is a really exciting thing that I like to do. There's probably about 15 of these, but these are just 3 of them that you can kind of use. And I'll send you something after this. I'll get Perugia to send you a DIY workbook that I've put together with a load more of these in. But when you start to look at this, you start to figure out where you fit into a market. Am I kind of high-end, elitist, in this very small pocket of the market? Or am I mass appeal in the market? And this can change depending on what market you're in. I spoke to someone lately about being in it's luxury leather goods for the shooting industry. But a little bit like the equestrian industries, part of it is very elitist. So he wanted to bring more of a young, fresh, different appeal to this kind of industry. So we had to figure out a way to do that. And you can look at if you're serious or playful or conventional or a bit of a rebel or more masculine or more feminine. And that isn't in terms of gender, but in terms of style and how you portray to the outside world. And there's loads of these you can work with. But this is a really exciting exercise to do, because you start to get a feel for how you're going to be perceived by other people and how you can put that together visually. And you can do this as well with logos. So if you put the logos of other companies that you want to be like, mass appeal would be like Asda, elite would be like Waitrose, and you kind of move the slider to where you want to be if you're in that kind of industry. So it's a really exciting thing to do. So brand confidence. Just imagine now that you've figured it out. You've figured out your purpose, your mission, your vision, your values. You know what kind of personality your brand has, and you've got that kind of strategy in place. You can start to come up with the messaging and the behavior and you can decide how you're going to behave, whether you are a no questions asked refund kind of person, or whether you keep it close to your chest and that kind of thing. So and you can decide how your visual identity is going to look, how you are perceived to be online and in packaging or from a service point of view. And you can actually use your brand in more ways than just these. You can use them in terms of experience and the process of you go through of getting customers and how that is. So they really do define how you operate as a business. And when leaders have brand confidence, it means that they can communicate really effectively across the company. And the employees get really confident because their leaders are leading them and giving them direction, and they know what to say and how to say it and how to behave. And they don't have to ask their line manager or supervisor for approval for something, because they know what the company stands for, so they can make the decision on their own, so they feel more empowered. And when employees can deal with that on their own, without the leader to have intervention and be involved, the clients get really confident, because they know they can just call and it will be dealt with, or they know that they can just order through one click and it will be simple, and they know they get it in a few days or in a day. So when all of this happens together, organizations really thrive and move forward. And you know, I live to add life to ideas, and this is kind of how we get there. So hopefully that's been a help in figuring out what's next for you. And I love, actually, in the chat there was someone who said they'd recently rebranded, and it's an amazing time to rebrand, because we're going through such a different time that actually we can decide now how we want to do things, how we want to communicate, how we want to be. I've been doing it myself with my brand, tweaking things slightly, and changing the messaging to the times. So hopefully this helps you to do the same. And if there's a better time than any to look at your brand and your message and how you're perceived in the world, now is the time. So that's it. Thank you very much. And here's if you want to connect with me, just jump on LinkedIn. I'm there. You can drop me an email if you've got any specific questions, but you'll also get an email with the content after. And Perugia is going to have this brand confidence workbook to send out to you. And this is basically, since all this has happened, I've taken a workshop that I usually do with clients, and I've tried to give as much direction as possible in a workbook, so you can kind of work through this yourself and try to get through as much as possible. And obviously I'm always here for questions if needs be.
Great, thank you very much, Danny. It's really interesting to know about brand. I feel like we're definitely in a period of reflection, and lots of small companies, medium companies, large companies are really trying to reflect on who they are and where they're going to be going in the future, because I think we've recognised that there's a lot that is changing in the world, and so that means that either ourselves as individuals or companies need to look at rebranding. So please, everybody, do feel free to drop any questions that you might have into the chat. I have got a couple here already. So one of the questions is, what is the difference between personal branding, company branding, particularly I think those people who are perhaps starting something from scratch themselves, who are an individual that is also creating a company. Where do they merge? Do they blend? What are the differences, or are there none?
It's a really interesting question, because I think, like most things, it depends on your intent. So when you start a business, you have an intention. You just maybe a lot of people worry about if that will change down the future. So I mentioned it's kind of for now, not forever, usually branding. And even though you can keep it for 50 years or 1 year before you change it, you don't have to be restricted by just one type of thing or one type of brand or how you want to be perceived. So when you start your business, if you're a person and you want to be perceived as a person, you want to deal with people individually, actually, if you go through this branding process and you initially think you're going to start a company, but then through this process, some of your values end up being personal, or you want to make sure that you give a personal service. You want to deal with people yourself and only delegate maybe the other tasks that are more back office or admin. Maybe you should be that person, and it shouldn't be a company. So you may want to change your mind there. The difference really, I think, to answer your question, between a personal brand and a company brand is just how you intend to use it, or how you want other people to view it. So it can really help to understand what you want your company to look like, and whether you need to be that person, or whether you want to build some equity into a company. I mean, brand equity is a completely different conversation, but essentially all of this creates value in your brand. You just have to assess whether you are going to need to transfer that value in the future, because if you build a personal brand and everything's about you, and then you want to sell the company, it becomes really hard because it's attached to you. Where if your intention is maybe to build a company and sell it like a lot of startups do, you may want to think about building equity into the company so you can leave it at some point and still retain some value.
Yeah, so I guess it's around walking the walk, talking the talk. So if you represent wellness, for example, you as an individual, and your company represents wellness, you as an individual are a brand, your own brand within your company brand. And so everything that you need to do needs to be around wellness in terms of your, I guess, your kind of social media presence and within your company and also within your own personal brand. So it's I think it's really interesting. It's obviously very different when people are individuals within a larger company. And we've got a question here which is saying that you yourself, Danny, have recently rebranded Danny and Co. What was your thought process behind your visual identity, and what does your brand communicate about your personality?
So my I am, all of my work is, I love what I do. It's one of those things that I think I'm in a small section of people which, you know, have kind of found their thing and found alignment in what they do. So yeah, it's very much about fun for me and enjoyment and innovation as well, in terms of making sure that whatever I'm doing, it's for the greater good, so for humanity. So I think Anya knows I've kind of tweaked my brand slightly, and it kind of went from a big, like, audacious, glorious goal that I was working towards to something a little bit more close to me. So I decided to go from going after the big brands and doing some contracting for them, and then doing other things and freelancing and some small bits for other people, to align into what I actually want to do. So I started to think about the customers I've had, the clients I've done branding work for, and if I could do more of that, just do more of the stuff that I really enjoyed. So I started to align that. So what I've done recently is just to look at the things I actually want to do. You know, it's sometimes really easy to get caught up in a big, audacious goal or idea that that me personally, I forgot what I actually enjoyed to do. So I wanted my brand to reflect that. So I'm paradoxical, really, because between personal brand and company brand, my company is Danny and Co. So it's kind of both, but it's the brand and how that's communicated visually is that there's a big circle around the O. You've probably seen it on there somewhere. There's a big circle around the and Co. And I wanted to put emphasis around the fact that even though my name's in the company, the emphasis is on the and Co, because it's all about the other people. It's I facilitate something. I don't. Nothing comes from me and someone else's brand. I just facilitate them building their own brand. So I wanted the emphasis to be on that, which is why there's a big old circle around and Co, because it can stand for a number of things: collaboration, company. So yeah, I wanted that to be conveyed in there, and I wanted a really different color scheme. And it's quite a funny story. I started the company when I had my son, and one of the TV programs he watched was called Bing, and it's about this bunny. And if you see this bunny, the color scheme of the bunny is he's jet black, but he's got terracotta in his ears. So I used that as a color scheme because it was a really important time in my life when I started the design studio, and I wanted to inject that kind of family feel into the company. So that's where I got that from. Yeah, and I'm just working on the visuals for kind of content and stuff, and that will convey my personality, which is I'm quite an introvert, but I come out of my skin in different circumstances. I think we all do. One of those is things like this. So yeah, it's that's how I come up with my own anyway.
Inspiration from children's TV programs. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, my entire life is like cartoons, and I grew up watching Japanese animated cartoons, and so I've always got this child in me that, you know, get novelty stuff and pictures on the wall of magazines and comics and stuff from when I was a kid. So yeah, I try and keep that that fun element, even though it's we kind of work with innovative brands and startups. It's yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had in this line of work.
That's great. You talked earlier about purpose, vision, and mission. And we've got Gemma on the call today, and she has she works for a water company, and she said that her company's purpose is to bring environmental and social prosperity to the region we serve through our commitment to love every drop. Now, I read that and I thought, I really, really like that, but I don't know, is that purpose, is that mission, or is that vision?
To bring environmental and social prosperity to the region, we serve through our commitment to love every drop. So it feels like it's been built around this tagline, to love every drop, which feels more like a campaign headline than it does like an integral part of a brand, but you can still use it. So so this is how I break it down. To bring love every drop is the brand, and it's the company. Yeah, brilliant. So love every drop, yeah, is an amazing headline, which is why it works as a logo, because it conveys that. That real love for like appreciating the small things. Like every drop is like you're almost grateful to have, every drop. So I get that from that. To bring environmental and social prosperity to the region that feels more like a purpose to me. Like you're always going to do it. It's the reason you're operating, because you want to bring prosperity to the region through what you do. And then the serve through our commitment to love every drop is a mission. So actually it could act as a vision statement, but there's a bit of vision and mission in there.
Yeah, I love it. I love the love every drop. I think that's really, really, really
yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely in a time where, and I've had conversations with clients the last few days where it's a time that companies want their employees to get behind them, but we're finding that employees that have perhaps been on furlough have really mixed feelings about the organisations that they're working for, whether they've been furloughed or there's a risk of redundancy, etc., etc. So I guess this is a really important time that companies really do think about what is their purpose, what is their mission, what is their vision, to make sure that anybody who is working from them can get behind them at this time. So if there was one thing that everybody here could really focus on and take away from today, what would be the kind of one or two things that people should really focus on to really help build their brand going forward?
This is a really good starting point. It's kind of why I wanted to go through those 5 things. They are, in my mind, a bare minimum. If you've never been through a purpose, vision, mission, values, personality kind of exercise in any way, please have a go and do it, because you'd be surprised what comes out of it. It's the whole reason I trademark brand confidence, because you can physically see it in people and it's funny, like it can be a simple thing. Like if you figure out your, even just the vision, for example, like the big thing you want to work towards. If you just figure that out, a light bulb goes off and you go, oh my God, that's it. That's what I want to do. That's the thing I want to do. But it's like a big goal. So some people feel a little bit overwhelmed to start working towards it. So the values start help you to start figuring out the stuff that's closer to the ground. Like, how do I need to be talking to people and acting and reacting and doing the things every day? And with the values, you can then come up with your kind of mission. So actually, the water thing is a really good example. But in general, these 5 things, I would say, actually, you could even put off the personality if you don't want to do any visual stuff yet. That's kind of it's a nice tool to get an idea of how you want to be, how you want to look, and how the kind of personality that your visual brand has. But if you just do the first 4, you'd be way ahead of most people. And to bring, I guess, a little bit closer to the current circumstances, I think the difference in what a lot of people are feeling at the moment is because there's a lot of permanent decisions being made on short-term, temporary things that are happening. And from the people that I've spoke to in completely opposite ends of the spectrum, people that have had to lay people off and close the business, people that are doing very well, it's funny how the people who made those permanent decisions on temporary situations had no real understanding of why they were doing what they were doing, and that's why it was so easy to close the business. Whereas the other people kind of that pushed through and made some changes and did certain things, their team really look up to them now, because even though, you know, it's a tough time and everyone's kind of had to go home and be on furlough, they've made the most of government offers, other things, working from home. They've had to change their entire infrastructure to allow their team to work from home, and people remember that forever. So if you bake that into your brand, that you know that you care about your people and that's where it begins, and that's how you want to be viewed by the outside world, how confident are the leaders now that the employees look at them really positively, and how positive does that look to the outside world that they're actually trusting on? I love when I get an email from someone saying, we're working from home, we might have to postpone our meeting, but let's have it next week because I'm just changing the infrastructure to 300 people in an office to, you know, 280 people at home. How great is that? It feels great that they're doing what they can. And I like it as a customer as well when I see that happening. So that's where the confidence comes from. And it all stems from the brand and what you decided in the first place.
There's so much to think about and consider there, and I'm really really pleased that you're going to be sharing this booklet with us all. I feel like it's you know, that lots of people are asking about our brand and, you know, and our company and what's going to happen, and, you know, we deliver face-to-face events usually, and we can't do that, and we're not even sure when we're going to be able to do that again. So we're really kind of looking deep within, okay, who are we, what do we do, what do we want to be doing in the future, and how are we going to make that happen, and how do we get our people who work for us to believe in that and to adapt to that change, and our customers to come on the journey with us. So I think this booklet that you've put together for everybody here today is going to be a really, really useful tool. So we will email that to you probably in the next day or so, along with the link for the video today. So thank you very much, Danny, for creating it. I'm conscious that we're running a bit over time and people are going to have to start dropping off. So thank you very much, Danny, for joining us today. And I know that your contact details are there and that you're happy to hear from anybody if they want to go a little bit deeper into some conversations and discussions that we've started today. So please do get in touch with Danny. There are more motivation and isolation events coming up. We've got breath work at 4 o'clock today. That is very, very good for helping with stress and anxiety. It's a 30-minute class. So if you can schedule that in at 4 o'clock, please do come along. The link is in Eventbrite where you registered for today's session. And then we have got Dr. Sophie Bostock talking about sleep tomorrow. I, for one, am very excited by that because I am not sleeping at all at the moment, as I'm sure many of you are. So please do come along to that and do have a look at some of the events that we have coming up next week. And thank you, everybody, for giving up your time this morning and coming to join us. There's lots of thank you messages coming through on the chat. So thank you again, Danny. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Bridget.